All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Recovery Scene. I have Tony Jolet with me. Now, his story is kind of neat because his addiction started at 14. He went into his first rehab at 16, but his brother wrote a best-selling book about their childhood called Hollywood Park. And I'm assuming you can get that, Tony, pretty much wherever books are sold, like Amazon or thrift books or whatever.
Quite literally anywhere. Yeah.
All right. So, Tony, I'm going to let you take it away, and the floor is yours. Please tell us your story. Give us some background. Who is Tony Jolet?
Well, first, thank you. It's a pleasure getting to know you, and thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Anytime we can talk about recovery, with other people that are striving for a different or new life, or to maintain one that they have. I mean, it's always a pleasure. Um, my story starts off like most people. I was born into a cult. So anyway, my dad was a heroin addict. To be specific, my dad was a heroin smuggler, and a certified badass. And he was once sentenced to life in Mexican prison. He got busted, smuggling drugs across the border. And in the 50s and 60s, there was no place for drug addicts to go.
Right.
AA was not welcoming to drug addicts, and so there was a cult started in Santa Monica called Synanon.
Tony, I was going to say, you just said my life starts off like most people's. I was born into a cult. Back up for me for a second. Okay, so you're going to tell us about this, right? Like, okay, just go.
So the cult was called Synanon, and Synanon was a utopian society, which basically means that you give up all your worldly possessions when you move in, and you are never to leave ever again. You live there. And so this was a place that was a good place at first. This was a place for drug addicts to, have an environment with other drug addicts, sort of like an NA and CA and some of those from the very, very beginning. It was about, there was about support, but it was a cult nonetheless. And my dad went there for his drug addiction, and a lot of other people went there. And then a lot of other people that weren't addicts went there just because there was this, wonderful, utopian, experimental society. And in the 60s and early 70s, that was, a lot of people thought that was a real possibility. So I say that just only because, from day one, my life has been affected by drugs and alcohol.
Right. Now, was your dad married at this time?
What's that?
Was your dad married at this time?
My dad was not married. My dad met my mom in Synanon.
Okay.
And my mom, alternatively, had smoked pot once in her entire life and didn't like the way that she felt, and had never tried another drug since. And I think it would only take a cult for these two people to meet and to fall in love, because nowhere else, she graduated with a master's degree at 18 from UC Berkeley, and he was a heroin smuggler, once sentenced to life in Mexican prison. Where else are these two people going to come together? So suffice it to say, they had my brother and I. We were born into the cult. My first 7 years, I was an orphan. You weren't raised by your family. You were born, and then you had a few months with your parents, and then you were removed completely from them, and you were raised in, for all practical purposes, an orphanage, while they were out doing, whatever it is that the cult needed them to do. It was, it's hard looking back, and at that point in my life, because through a lot of talking and a lot of therapy and a lot of work, I've come to terms with what that was, and how that shaped me. And what I thought was just an interesting experience became, later on in life, the more work I did and the more, inflection I had, the more I realized that was a huge part of all kinds of, actions and reactions and feelings that I was having, that I was just suppressing.
Right. Now, let me ask you, and anything that's too sensitive, you can absolutely say you're not comfortable with. Now, a lot of the times when people are raised in cults, they talk about abuse. Did you experience any of that?
I experienced only just the mental side of things. Like I was
Okay.
very, very depressed as a child. I was lonely. I never knew what those feelings were. I never had like a person, you know. And best I can describe it is that if you were to ask me, like, who took care of you when you were a child? I have no idea. And alternatively, if you were to ask every other person on this planet, you know, were you the one that took care of Tony Gillette when he was a child? There's not one person that would raise their hand and be like, that was me. You know what I mean? So I mean,
Right.
I think that there was some mental, you know, and just physiological, you know, emotional abuse through that experience. And there are other people, you know, that came out that have like had to experience terrible abuse, you know. But for the most part, the children were like seen as an extraordinary expense. The leader, his name was Chuck Dietrich, and he didn't like children. You know what I mean? At one point, he directed all of the followers to get vasectomies, you know, all the men, because they were just expensive and sort of got in the way.
Mm.
So we, at the age of 7, my brother and I escaped with our mother. Um, it sounds like like you know, you're escaping this environment, but you have to understand, like, we never grew up with a mother. We had no concept of what mother was. So
Right.
for my brother and I, we were essentially kidnapped by some lady who kept telling us to call her a mom, with no concept of what that was, from the only environment, safe or unsafe, that we knew.
Right,
And
because
it
the
was just,
phone would have been the only thing that you would have grown up with.
yeah, right. So that's all we knew. And then we were just pulled out of that, rightfully so, but then with somebody that was just terribly unstable. And so how that led to, like, I mean, I think that, and there's much more to that, but I want to talk about addiction. And what ended up happening was that we escaped and they came after us, and then we had to like disappear to Oregon. And so I had never like I had never fit in anywhere, even to this day. You know, like it's very, very difficult for me to feel like I fit in, even though I look like I fit in all kinds of environments. I don't. I don't feel inherently like I fit in. You know, in fact, ironically, the only place I really do feel like I fit in has always been the program for me. You know, which for me, I go to AA and NA and CA. Like I don't, you know, all the whatever. I work in 12 step, and it's a big part of my life. And that's where I've always felt most comfortable, is just around. And it doesn't have to be in the A's. If anybody wants to talk recovery or talk about overcoming trauma or any of the above, that's my place. Like that's where I feel like those are my people, and that's what I found through sobriety. But at the time, I didn't have any of that. So like when I first tried alcohol, I was 14. It was Thunderbird wine. It was in Salem, Oregon, and I loved it. You know, I loved how just all of a sudden it just all went off, you know, and all of the stuff and all the chatter and all like the assessing of what people thought, and you know, it just stopped.
You know, I didn't think to ask, Tony. So your mom wanted to escape with you guys. What about your dad?
He stayed.
Okay.
Yeah, he stayed. Like, and it got crazy, Leslie. I mean, it's just like it started off as a utopian society. Chuck Diedrich, the guy that started running, ended up relapsing. He was using while running this cult that had tens of thousands of followers and all this money, and it became militant, and men, women, children, everybody had to shave their heads. Whatever he said went. They had loudspeakers in all the different houses, and they would like play his recordings every week. And you know, it's brainwashing, and you know, and it was dangerous, and there was a lot of threatening, and he ended up going to jail for putting a rattlesnake in somebody's mailbox. Like,
Oh, wow.
and in the 70s, this is very well known. Like Synanon was a big part of the culture of Los Angeles. Everybody knew Synanon. There was a big fire in Malibu. Oh, there's the Synanon guys marching out to go help. Like it was big. And so was the story of its downfall. But he stayed. I think we left when he was like, he directed everybody to start swapping spouses. So if you were married to, you know, like Jim and Jerry, they're married, you know, now it's like, okay, now everybody switch. Because he felt like there was, you know, people were depending on each other or that couple more than the group. And so in order to, you know, validate the
Right.
group and keep it
Right.
tighter, everybody should switch, because it's about the group and not about the individual or the couple.
That makes sense, because when you know, divide and conquer, basically.
Right. Yeah. And so then they started matchmaking based on what they felt would be good fit, you know. So I mean, it's just like I said, when I first used for the first time, it was, and by the way, it became a priority literally that day. That following week, it was within a week, I was sneaking out every single night in order to go find more alcohol, go drink. I don't know if it's just been because of my experience or the fact that I was in a cult for the first 7 years. Like I've never understood like rules in the sense that these are the society rules you need to follow. I've never been like that ever.
Right, right. I mean, it does make sense. Like, I have to make sense of these first few years of my life, and it's completely impossible. And now I found this magic elixir that makes it like, who cares?
Yeah,
Doesn't matter.
it doesn't matter. And there was nothing. There like second place on my list of priorities was not even like within sight. There was just that. Like
Right.
whatever consequences, whatever, like you're gonna ground me, like you're gonna ground me. Who
Right.
cares? Like, I don't care. You can't like, and so it started to be. It was immediately a huge problem, and it started spiraling really quickly. My mom, I was living in Oregon. We were in talks. I would spend some summers with my dad at this point. I was at 14 now, which we left at 7. So there's 7 years. When I was around 10 or 11, my dad came back in the picture. My brother and I would come spend summers in Los Angeles. But at 14, my mom was like, yo, like he needs to go with you because I can't handle him.
Mm.
And for my dad and Bonnie, who's my mom, my stepmom, but she's always been my mom. Like Bonnie has always been.
Would it be wrong to say that your mom was like, kind of didn't want to take responsibility?
She had like not kind of. She didn't take responsibility. Like she's like I said, a psychologist, had a master's degree at 18 from UC Berkeley. Like very very intelligent, very wise woman. Who we went through that experience of being in a cult and never spoke of it again. Like, how do you have an understanding of what it means to be a psychologist and how important that is to work on that stuff, and then have a child or two children that've been through something that crazy and traumatic and just pretend like it never happened and try to just sweep it under the rug? And her priority was always just the next relationship. She would find a guy, and then all of our life became whatever that guy was about. And then she'd find another guy, and then all of our life became about what that guy's about. And we were just, children were not
priority.
No, we were just sort of like, just whatever.
Begging.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
As a parent today, like I can't even fathom that.
I kind of think of, and I'm not trying to make light, but I cannot remember his name. What's his name from the Big Bang Theory? Remember, his mom was a psychologist, and she was the crappiest mom ever. I can't remember which one it was, but that's what it reminds me of. Like, my mom's a psychologist, but she sucks as a mother. Like, she can teach everybody else how to be a mom, but she's got no clue. Yeah.
And throw in a bunch of like, she's got a bunch of just other stuff. Like I happen to think that like there's a lot of like law of averages, and so if you're like super smart in one area, you tend to be lacking in another, and there's this balance. And I think for her, she's just super like awkward. She's socially awkward, very book smart, but like just can't, just not very high functioning in regular society. It doesn't even understand it. And so
when it comes to human interaction.
Yeah, completely. Whereas my stepmom Bonnie was the exact opposite, just super loving, super, forgiving, and just talk and just chance. And I blow it. I blow it again. Oh, it's okay. I love you. I blow it again. It's okay. I love you. Screw it all up again. Okay, we'll come here. And her thing was like, you never know when you're helping somebody for the last time.
That's amazing.
Right? And she truly believed that, and so there was no, like, this is your last chance. It was you keep getting a last chance until it's your last, until you don't need another chance.
Right.
And that's what I needed, and I might have used up, I think I took it right down to the brink. But they were like, I probably was at literally the last, like this is the last time, but so she was sort of like the guiding light for my dad, who had been through all of that, and he got together with her, and we sort of integrated with her family, and it was just this loving environment that was awesome. And but I was still like, 14. I moved to LA. I was already at this point using. I mean, at 15, I was using PCP and drinking and smoking pot and cocaine and LSD and the whole gamut. Not
Okay,
going to school,
PCP, thank you for aging us both.
right? Right?
None of
It's
the cool kids say that anymore, Tony.
yeah. Well, that's a crazy drug. Like of
Oh
all
my
the drugs
God.
I've taken, that one is probably one of the ones where I was like the most. There's no control at all. Like I can't even fathom. Yeah, if somebody said jump up a bridge, I would have done it.
Right?
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's unreal.
So we're in LA. I'm going crazy. My parents are basically like they the best. I mean, we've talked about it a lot since. Like the their whole deal was just not what college is Tony going to go to, not what career can we get him into. I mean, it was literally like, just can we keep this kid alive until he's 18? Like, will he be alive? Because I
Right.
was arrested. I mean, at 16, I was already arrested like 8 times. Always busted with this. They found out I wasn't going to school for like a year, like a year. And so they drugged me into Westchester High. It was the Nancy Reagan years. Just say no. They just started having
The war
counselors.
on drugs.
Yeah, but then I mean, they just started having counselors in high schools where they're like, listen, we really need to talk about this. And so I had sort of like lapsed on a bunch of my responsibilities. And so when they asked me, I'll never forget, I was in the high school with the counselor and my parents, and they're like, do you have a drug problem? And I quickly realized that if my answer was yes, it got me out of all the responsibilities of all the stuff that I'd done for the whole year. Like basically it was just like, oh, he's got a drug problem. This excuses all this crap that he's been going through.
Right.
So I was like, yeah, 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 I have a drug problem. If that gets me out of all of this, all the responsibilities and all this stuff, then okay. And I went to the Claire Foundation. The Claire Foundation in Santa Monica used to have a program for teenagers. And I moved out of my parents' house at 16, and I never returned. Like I went to the Claire Foundation and got sober, and I wasn't ready to be sober. I was just ready to, not take responsibility for my actions. And yeah, I mean, it was co-ed, and so I was, seeing girls in the place, what I mean? And one of us started a relationship, and we got caught one night, like, in the middle of the night. I was in her room, or making out or whatever, and they like kicked us out. And we went to Oregon, and at 18, I had a child. His name was Jordan, and she left, and was like back into her addiction, 8 months later. I was with him, alone. And I mean, that's when my real addiction sort of started. That's when like the addiction that somebody that's been through it knows. That's when the darkness sort of like starts fading in. I don't know if you see like the vignette of a
Right.
picture that starts on the outside, but then just slowly fades until completely. That's when it just started. Like the outsides of the picture started getting
Yes.
black. And listen, I mean, I neglected. I would leave him with whomever would take him as often as possible so that I could go out and use, and at that time I was heavily involved with crystal meth and drinking. And, and that's just not a combination that works well with, a toddler, and
Right.
so I was just like, here. I mean, and listen, I mean, I wish I could change it. It's not something I'm proud of, but it's something that I feel like it's important to talk about because
I
it's
always tell people one thing the 12 steps, I mean, they get a lot of things right, but one thing the 12 steps really gets right is they say at the end, we use against our will. And I always tell people, there are people out there, absolutely, that should not be parents, 100%. They're abusive, they're awful, etc. I'm not trying to, downplay any child of addicts
Mhm.
experience.
Right.
But any parent who is, the best word I can come up with is normal, even though we both know that that doesn't exist.
Right.
But any parent who is quote unquote normal, who has a child, would never willingly neglect that child or give up that child if something wasn't in the way. An addiction gets in the way.
Big time.
Yes.
Big time. And I've experienced that with lots of people through the years. And I think that's a sticking point for a lot of people, you know, and that's something that people hold a lot of, they don't want to talk about, which is why it's important for me to talk about it, because it helps me, you know, it's still a living amends. I have since made amends to him, and we've worked it out, and we have a relationship today. But listen, here's the thing, like, I would change my story today. Like, I know a lot of people are like, I wouldn't change a thing because what I went through got me to where I'm at today. And if it wasn't for this, I would wholeheartedly agree. But I would actually sacrifice my happiness today if I could go back and be a good father to Jordan. And I think that's what being a parent is about. You know,
Yes.
and I think that's getting sober, and that's what I've learned in going through these programs is what that is sacrificing yourself and putting your child before you. You know,
Right.
but suffice it to say, the best I can do is just be open and honest about it, and then move on, you know, with my head up held high.
Right.
You know, and I think that, and that's what I've done, you know, to the best of my ability.
Right.
So, but yeah, but it was crippling. I mean, it was just like, I don't know how, just day after day, crystal meth, drinking, you know, it's such a horrible, like, even like later on when I got into heroin, like those years, even with like the crystal meth, it's such a horrible drug. Like that thing, the psychosis you go through after several days of being awake and then not being able to sleep, and then the paranoia and all of it, right? And so I moved back to LA. My family was just like, we need to get him out of there, meaning Jordan. So he moved with my mom because they were like, he's not, you know what I mean, in an environment that's good for a child, you know? And so after he left, you know, then it was really on, you know, because I had no responsibilities and all the guilt in the world, you know, because of, you know, I mean, my son is gone and I'm a shitty father and I'm also messed up on everything. You know, like I have a 9th grade education. I'm working in sales. Like I was living in Playa del Rey, and like my whole life became, you know, wake up, go to work, come home, go to the dealer, buy crack, smoking crack until 1 or 2 in the morning, drinking at the same time, smoking weed at the same time. I discovered Vicodin, you know, around this time, and Vicodin was my saving grace. Like Vicodin for me was what I was able to function after these nights of drinking and crack. I was able to wake up in the morning and take, you know, some Vicodin and then function throughout the day.
Right.
But what ended up happening is Vicodin is not the kind of thing that you can just take casually. After a while, you have to start taking more, and you have to take more and more often and more often. And that's exactly what happened with me. And to the point where, I mean, I was at 50 Vicodin, said 50, 750 milligram Vicodin a day.
Right. Somebody said drugs are hell in the disguise of heaven.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so well put, you know, because it's, you at first I'm thinking, this is great. I can just feel like this all the time. This is fantastic. I love this feeling, you know, and I think anybody that's gone through it realizes that you start off that way and then it completely turns and morphs into this thing that you're just beholden to, you know, and it overtook everything, you know. And so I was in Playa del Rey. I was partying every single night, and of course that was a problem, right? So I moved to downtown LA because obviously it was Playa del Rey's fault and not my fault. And so what's happened at this point is I'm living in downtown Los Angeles. I've alienated all my friends. I'm no longer going out. I'm no longer going, you know, meeting friends and going out and doing things and having this social life. It's been, you know, almost a year since that's happened. I've alienated pretty much everybody at this point. I'm there. My life is surrounded by just going to work for a few hours, coming home. You know, I'm taking Vicodin, I'm smoking crack, I'm drinking every single night. You know, pot is just it's just all the time. And my dealer keeps running out of Vicodin. And one day he's like, I don't have Vicodin, but what I do have is heroin. And and I say this every time I speak, but if you ever want to quit Vicodin, I 100% can do that for you. Like I know the cure to Vicodin addiction, and that is heroin. When you take heroin, you will never want a Vicodin again. Your Vicodin addiction is gone completely.
I was like, tell us more, Tony. Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
It's gone. You will never, ever, 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 ever feel like you need Vicodin again. It started for me like it was so stupid. Like he's like, because I'm like going crazy because I'm getting sick because I don't have anything. And he's like, just take the heroin, put it in an eyedropper, and then just snort the water with the heroin. That'll just get rid of the withdrawals. And I was like, okay, like that's great. And so that lasted for like half a day. And by the next day, I'm already shooting it up. Like I was just like, this is whatever. Like I just needed to just get the whole thing.
It's just not enough.
It's never enough. Like, I mean, a week later, you know, I was like, why do crack when I can just be shooting up the cocaine? And then I'm like, well, why do either when I can do both? Like, why not just shoot up cocaine and heroin at the same time and do speedballs? And then that was like, oh my God, this is great. And I'm my own chemist, you know, I'm in my apartment there. Like if I fall into the floor in the convulsions, I've done just too much cocaine in that mixture and I got to pull back the cocaine. That's too much. You shouldn't be having convulsions on the floor. And so let's move that around a little bit. And so, but this is my life, you know, physically my body's breaking down. My body has hives all over it because my liver can no longer withstand all of the toxins that I'm putting in my body. I'm drinking heavily every single day, every single morning. I'm waking up sick as a dog. I've got to get to the bank. I've got to get, you know, to cop. And then I got to go through the whole idea of doing all the thing and shooting it up. And then, or should I just smoke? And it was a second story loft and I could see people in the mornings and I would be so envious. Like these people would just wake up, take a shower and go to work.
Right.
It was like, how in the, like, I couldn't fathom just having to do that. The ordeal that I had to go through every day just to get to par was overwhelming, you know, and that's the second part, which is that I had not taken a drug to get high in a year, 2 years. I wasn't getting high anymore. I was just taking drugs not to get sick. It wasn't fun. I wasn't feeling good. I was just trying not to get sick.
Right.
So,
and I think that's the whole using against our will.
oh yeah.
We don't want to get high. We just don't want to be sick. It's the fear of being sick.
Right. And if you've been through it enough times, like it's completely traumatic. It's a horrible experience. And I think there's long-term ramifications. I know there's a lot of guys I know that, you know, that you don't come out of it unscathed, you know, the psychological side of things. And it was, you know, so there I am, you know, just this is my entire life. My life has come down to just this little shell. I wake up on this leather couch every day. I smell of like sweat, you know, and that mixture of like the sleeping in the same spot for like a year on a couch, sweating in the same spot every day. And that just gets more and more rank every single day. And you come to every day to that smell and just feeling disgusting. It's
just awful, everyday things.
Yes.
Like showering. Showering may as well be a 5K. Like
well, getting to the shower, and then of course, you know, you're sick, you're freezing cold. Anything that touches you, you don't want to shower, you don't want to touch anything, but then your body feels like there's acid all over it because you've done whatever. Like I was drinking so much that my bed sheets would be completely soaked. You know, I would sweat so much at night. I would wear a shirt in the middle of the night, change the shirt because that one was drenched.
Yep.
And this is every day, you know, and I'm trying to function. So I woke up one day, it was December 19th, 2007. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. I was like, and you know, it was nothing about that day. There was nothing that happened. There wasn't some traumatic, I was literally like, I cannot do this one more day.
Right.
And so I called my brother and I was like, dude, like, I really need help. I really need help. I can't keep doing this. Here's what's going on. And he was like, heroin? Like, seriously? Like, he had no idea, and so he was like, all right, I'm coming over. And, he's an artist, he
Now,
not
is
only
he
wrote it,
older brother or younger brother?
he's a younger brother. He wrote the book, of course, Hollywood Park. He's also the lead singer of a band called the Airborne Toxic Event. It's an alternative rock band that is very popular. He's very, sort of fantastical and passionate. And so he was like, we're going to less than zero this stuff. I'm coming over. We're just going to stare eye to eye while you sweat through this for the next week. Like, very just like, I was like, all right, well, let's just find. So we called my mom and dad, and they're like, they started laughing because they thought I was kidding. Because they're like, Harry, you wouldn't, after what your father went through, like, there's no way. And I was like, well, we found this hospital, Brotman Hospital in Los Angeles, and they had a detox. They had a place where you could go that if you went there, they would help you chemically detox from drugs. And I was like, that sounds amazing. Whatever. I mean, I was throwing up outside of the car on the trip there, on the parking lot, on the way up. Like, I was just, there was 2 EMTs in the parking lot, because it's at an actual hospital. And the drug rehab, I think it was on the 5th floor. And both of them looked at me and then looked at my parents and they're like, 5th floor. Like, they
Yeah.
knew I was
Yeah.
great. And so we get there and they're like, they take all of my vitals and whatever. And they're like, we don't know how you're here. Like, right now, like, your liver enzymes are higher than anybody we've ever admitted into this program. And we've been around since the 80s. Like, you have no business being alive. Your body is so, like, you should be dead. But
Right.
if you're not dead, you should be, like, you know what I mean, on life support right now. Like, your
Right.
body
So
is
let's
so
make
toxic.
it clear to anybody that's watching, when it comes to alcohol, especially these two, alcohol and benzos,
Right.
go to detox. Go to detox, because the withdrawals can kill you. We don't even realize. I mean, like you said, you went in there and they were like, how are you alive?
Yeah.
Because when we drink to a certain point, it's like, it's just normal for us.
Right.
It's normal. When we do drugs to a certain point, benzos or opioids or opiates or whatever, it's normal, right? But the 2 things that you really need to watch out for as far as the withdrawals, alcohol, benzos, absolutely go to detox. Absolutely consult your doctor.
100%. 100%. I know. I mean, you've been around this long enough. I know a few people that didn't make it, and
Right.
it's no small deal, and it's not, and you're worth it. You're 100% worth it. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, I'll be fine. I don't like what, no, like, just, so they couldn't give
You're
me anything.
worth taking that little extra precaution for.
It's 100% worth it. And you're worth
Absolutely.
it. Yeah.
And I
They
think
were
people
like,
forget that, Tony. I think people, like, when they get to a point in their addiction, they're like, I'm a piece of crap.
100%.
I'm not worth it. Yeah, yeah, you are. Because even if you're not worth it to you, you're worth it to someone. You're worth it to your mom. You're worth it to your brother. You're worth it to your spouse. You're worth it to
You're
your
worth
kid.
it to your future self. You
To your
won't
future
always
self.
be that person that feels this way. And I think that that's what I've learned, is that you become this other person. And as this new person, you're out there. You owe it not just to your future self, but you owe it to the future people that you're going to help in that role
100%.
as your future self. I mean, it's just, and I don't think people understand that. It is possible to not only get better, but to then, be a beacon to so many other people, whether it's just your family and friends, or much more than that, whatever it is. But you have a wealth of information and knowledge and experience that can help a lot of people.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So you're in rehab this time. So
Right.
how does it go from here?
So first and foremost, they're like, we can't give you anything. You know what I mean? Your liver is so far, like, if we're afraid we give you anything to help with your detox, we're going to kill you. So we're going to keep an eye on you, obviously, and we'll keep you, you know what I mean, like, under supervision, but there's going to be no medical detox. You're going to need to just get through it.
Right. There's no Ativan for you, son.
Yeah, nothing. And so, and it was it was scary, and it was heart-wrenching, and it was emotional as hell for me, because I wanted it. I was ready. Like I wanted it so bad that I cried every single day. I mean, it was so emotional for me to feel like, A, that I was actually doing something about something that was killing me, and B, that like working out how I was even worth, you know what I mean? I always thought that I should be killed or I should die. And that's just how the story should have ended. I mean, sidebar, like there's times when like I look at my life and I'm like, maybe I did just die on that couch, and this is just not real, because it's like, if you've been through what I've been through, like this, it's hard to fathom that you get to where I am now. Like there's no way. It's not real. I died. And that's okay too. Even if that's true, that's okay, because this
And
is still
yeah, I
very.
mean, we kind of did, we kind of did. We died to this old life, and it might be trite or, kind of um, science fictiony, but we were reborn to this new one. Really, unless you have been, and it's like I always give this disclaimer: we're not saying, "Hey, you should go out and try this because the second time around your life will be awesome." But two main themes with addicts. One, I never felt okay. I never felt okay in my skin. I just wasn't comfortable being me. And the second one is, holy crap, I am born again. And not necessarily in a religious way if you're not religious, but I mean, it is what it is. Like, I have this second chance at life and I am not going to blow it. And we tend to be like so much more than we ever were at the beginning. It's
Right?
unbelievable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they 100% agree. 1000% agree. And so with that, I was at the point, and I quite honestly, I wish this on anybody that's trying to get sober, and that I was so desperate. If I have anybody that's like that has the gift of desperation, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think like there's so much power in desperation. And I
Mhm.
had it in spades. Like it was one of two things. I would die or I was going to get sober. And one of
Right.
those two things was going to happen. And I didn't care which, but there was 0%. I was not going back to that. That's the only thing. Even if I died, I was okay with that. Like, and I thought I was going to die many times, as I was detoxing. I was like, there's no way, like, this is it. Like, I thought for sure that I was going to die. And so the program was like 10 days. I didn't even know it was like Christmas time. Like, it apparently was like, December. Christmas came and went. I was in the program. I was, it was great. They had they had people come in, and panels come in and they would talk about AA. I wasn't ready and didn't know much, but I did have at least a very slim base from when I was 16 and when I was in Clare, because they did take me to AA meetings back then. So I had an idea of what AA was. Um, Quite honestly, like I was just like, what? Just tell me whatever it is that I need to do in order to, you know what I mean, get out of this and start feeling better. I'll do. I'll do. Like I was coming off so many drugs. I was so cold. I was freezing, coming off of all those opiates. Like I wore like probably a beanie for a month at
Yeah.
least. Like
Yeah.
everywhere I went, I was so freezing.
So weird. Yes.
Right? For
Yes.
like a month. And so they were like, listen, if you want to stay sober and you're serious about getting sober, then you need to go to a recovery house. Like, this program has been great, but if you go from here straight home, the numbers tell us that you have a high probability of relapsing. Like, you need to kind of stay away for a little bit. And so I was like, cool. Um, and so I went. There was a place that was like literally right across the street. I could see the window of the hospital. It was huge for me. Like, I wanted to stay. I wanted that connection. I mean, Leslie, I was holding on for dear
It
life.
was your
Like,
safe place. Yeah.
I was on, like, it was like I was holding onto a rope, but it wasn't a rope. It was like fishing line. And it was just like there was nothing there. And I'm still holding on with all I got because it's all I have. And so I went to the sober house, and I'll use quotes because no one there was sober. Everybody was using my roommate was like, this 6'4" guy that was taking like all of this. Like, it wasn't, what was it? I forget. Like it was one of those ones where it's like a benzo, but it like messes with your head too. So he was like out of his mind talking about code blue at like 3 o'clock in the morning, pacing the house. He shit himself in the closet because he thought it was the bathroom. Night one, right? I'm freaked. I'm freezing. I can't sleep anyway because I'm just coming like, I'm like, I'm in the mix. Like I've only been sober for just over a week. I'm freezing. I can't sleep. I'm still shaky. And then this guy's talking about code blue, pacing back and forth in the bed. I'm like, next night, it was a Wednesday night, and there was a meeting. And here's the thing, like the meeting, I didn't have my car at this point. Like I was just there, and so it was to the end of December, raining outside. This was a little house. The guy that ran that sober house was, he built like stereo systems and home theater. So it was a huge TV with the theater systems. It was warm and a couch, and all the guys are hanging out, and they're going to watch a movie in a little bit, and everybody's cooking dinner, and it's chill. And it's Wednesday night, and that's what they're going to do. But but there was a meeting that night. And that meeting was a walk in the rain, a bus ride, another walk in the rain to get to that meeting, but like the guys that I was talking to was like, listen, like that's where, you know what I mean? If you want to get sober, like that's what you got to do, and
Right.
it all started, like that was the moment in my life where it all started. And I'll never forget it because I had this conversation in my head, literally. And it was, do you want this or not? I'll never forget it. This was a real, do you want this or don't you? Because this life, all of your hopes and dreams, like that, it's out there. It's not in here. And at that point, that's when this became a program of action for me.
Right.
It stopped being like this fantastical thing that you should do or don't do or this and that. This was like, this was boots on the ground, get your ass out the door. You're going to deal with the rain, even though you're freezing, because that's how bad you want it. You know what I mean? And I wanted it just as bad as I wanted to cop back in the day when I was sick. And I would have done that same walk if I needed heroin. If somebody told me heroin was a 3-mile trek in the snow and I didn't have any, you better believe me, I was going to make it.
Right.
I had that same desperation, and I left that house, and I took the bus the wrong way. I had to get off the bus, to get on the right way. And it was Wednesday night meeting, and it was Robert Downey Jr. was the, and he's open about his thing. So I'm not like outing his anonymity or anything like that. Like he's very open about
You did not go. You are not about to tell us you went to a meeting where Robert Downey Jr. was speaking.
He wasn't speaking. He was the secretary of that meeting.
Oh my God.
So
that is so cool.
Well, I mean, I say that because I wanted you to get a feel for the crowd, right? The crowd was, he by the way, is a gem of a person. I don't know him personally, but I've talked to him, and I know we have a lot of people that I know, and he's into it. You know what I mean? And he's into this program, and he was a secretary of that meeting, which tells you how into it he is. And but so, I mean, but with him came a vibe, and there was like a lot of people, and everybody looked good, and everybody was up, and I mean, there was a fantastic speaker, but I wasn't that. You know what I mean? I was like, 11 days sober, 10 days sober, broken as fuck. You know what I mean? Standing out in the rain, crying, not sure if I can even walk through those doors. I wasn't ready for Robert Downey Jr. and all of those people that are like looking good and having fun, and this is a meeting and AA is a scene. I wasn't ready for all that. I just needed like a hug. I needed some salvation.
Right. And Tony, I tell my clients all the time, if you're not going to chase that recovery the way you chase that drug, that's when you're lost. Because like you said, like you wanted it as much as, when we get to a point where we want the recovery as much as we wanted the heroin, the meth, the whatever, that's when we know we're done. Right. That's when we know we're ready.
Yeah, I mean, that's
it's just like
your actions have to show that. I mean, it's not. I walked through those doors, and it was a very, 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 very scary feeling, and I didn't want to. It just put one foot in front of the other. But I will say, like, that threshold for me, and I talk about this, with my guys, like fear's a mile wide and a mile high and paper thin. When I walked through that door, that fear turned into accomplishment.
Right.
I was broken. That's okay. You know what I mean? Like, it was an AA meeting. Nobody there was judgmental. Everybody there was nice. They asked for who was the newcomer, and I stood up and I was bawling. You know what I mean? Not just broken and bawling. You know what I mean? Just, and not like excited, but just you could just, just broken. And so a couple people, gave me their number after the meeting. I got a ride home, and one of the guys at one of the panels came by the house, a day later and was like, "Come on, I'm taking you to a meeting." And I started finding my tribe. I started finding some people that I could trudge this with, and some guys that were serious about it too. And it's important for, if you're in early sobriety, to find like-minded people that are in it, that really want it as much as you do. Go check out meetings together, talk about stuff together. You're working through the steps. What's going on with you? How is that working out? Like, it's good to have that bond, and it's important. A lot like sort of a kid, like when you pick your friends for the first time, like, your friends are going to reflect how serious that you are. You get some people that are into it and serious, then that's gonna reinforce the fact that you are, and if you're not serious,
Right.
that the same is true. You'll seek out people that aren't serious either. You know what I mean? And you guys can all be, not serious together.
So, Tony, how many years has it been, and where is your life now?
On December 20th, I had 13 years sober.
Amazing. Amazing. Congratulations.
My life today. The, I mean, it's crazy good. It's crazy good, and quite honestly, like, every single thing I have should have a sticker underneath it that says belongs to AA,
Right.
because and for any of those people, anybody that's not in AA or NA, like, I don't mean that in the sense of just that program. I mean that the camaraderie that we share as fellow addicts, and
Right.
so please
Right.
don't,
That work.
I'm not in AA, so I'm not part of that. That's not all what I mean. That if you are struggling at all with any addiction or even trauma, we're in the same club, and I'm down. So, but I mean, the biggest change in my life, I adopted a little girl, 7 years ago. I got a second chance at being a
Wow.
father, and
How did that happen? Tell us about this little girl.
oh my God, Juliet, she's my everything. She's my everything. She's adopted. She's from Cleveland, Ohio. She's from Sandusky, Ohio, actually. Um, she's never known a father that wasn't there or wasn't coherent. She's never known what it's like to, not have a meal, or for me not to be around when she needs me, or to cry in the middle of the night and me not be around. And she's never not had a shower. She's never known what it's like to have an absent father. And I got a chance to be the father that I always hoped that I could be. And it's something that I take, and I have so much pride in. And I take it seriously, but at the same time, like, but I have so much fun with it, because now, I wouldn't say it's not redemption, it's gratitude. Like, you can't redeem yourself from past actions, in my opinion. Like, they're there, it's in the book, and it happened, and I take responsibility for it, and I move on. And then I can take that information and be this other person through a lot of self-work and working with a lot of other people. And then I'm this other person now. I'm not the same person. I can't hold myself accountable for things that this other person had done. We talked about that.
Right.
That person isn't even alive anymore. It doesn't
Right.
exist. I'm this other person. And it's
Well,
amazing.
Tony, Nicola Grace said, congratulations, that's amazing. And Recovery Army Mike said, my
Yeah,
man. And he said to
yeah,
tell you that he said, hey.
yeah.
So, I
Good.
mean, you got so many people. I mean, wow. Wow. What a story. I mean, unbelievable. Now, can I ask, how is your relationship with your son?
It's not ideal, quite honestly. I mean, when is it? But we talk from time to time. There was a period, like probably 5, 6 years ago, where we were much closer. I went out and saw him, and he came and saw me, and then we had a falling out. I mean, quite honestly, like, I'm still responsible for having boundaries, and he wasn't meeting some of those boundaries, when it comes to, behavior and how we treat myself and my mom, and you know, and by the way, that's tough. It's hard for me at times because I know that the reason why that I have these boundaries because he's the way he is because of my actions. And at the same time, I have to have boundaries, you know, around his actions. At some point as a father, I still have to I still have to expect accountability. We've been
That's,
through this. I've
that's
made my amends.
right.
At some point, he needs to work through that and become the man that he needs to be. I can't, I can't do any more than that. You know what I
Right.
mean? So at some point, here you are. I am here and I am dealing with whatever, and I can choose to do something about it or not doing something about it, but blaming others just isn't going to help anything.
Right. Right.
So it's quite honestly, it's not as ideal as I'd hope, but I mean, it's a long life, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
I mean,
honestly,
you have
like
time.
I changed it all around, you know, a little later than most, but fuck, but I sure did. I mean, I changed it around in a big way.
Right. And he's got time. He's got time.
We all have time. I'm not going anywhere. You know, I love him to death, and I hope, you know, that I hope at some point that it can be something way more. You know what I mean? And
Right.
if that's what's going to happen, I'll be stoked. If that doesn't, it isn't what happened, then I'm going to have to find a way to just, you know, work through it and keep being, you know, the father that I can be to Juliet. I will say, like, there's this moment when she was younger. She like threw up one night, you know, with children and all over her bed. And I picked her up and cleaned her up, and then cleaned the bed up, and then did it again, like an hour later. And an hour later again. You know what I mean? I was so tired, and I was in this room, and
Ah, been there.
right? I was like, I'm not getting any sleep. I don't function well in no sleep. It's one of my things from like all those I mean, getting sick so many times. I'm like, it reminds me of another feeling, and it just messes with my head. But after the third time I got her to sleep again, I was so tired, and I was so just like, ugh. And I've never forgot. I stood in her room and I prayed, and I thanked God for the opportunity to be that father. You know what I
Yes.
mean? And with my history, to be able to do that. That moment was like, I'm in it. Like sometimes you're just like, I'm in it. I'm in it. I'm doing it. And it's fucking hard, but I'm doing it anyway. And if you've been through like a lot of us addicts have been through, if you've been through the kind of shit we've all been through, like sometimes that's not a bad thing. Sometimes like the fact that it's hard and you're still like trudging, you're still sober, you're still doing it, like that's huge. That's
100%.
huge.
Yes. Yeah, that is fantastic. Tony, this whole thing has been fantastic. Tell people where they can find you on TikTok or Instagram or wherever you are.
It's my first letter T and my last name, Jollet. So TJOLLETT.
All right. And that's on
Instagram and
TikTok.
TikTok. Yeah.
All right. Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much for just being willing to share your story and being so open and honest with us. This was awesome.
Thank you. This is, I mean, you know, this has been just as much fun for me. I love talking about it. And quite honestly, it's like it never hurts to just for any addict to talk about their journey. You know what I mean? Like it's just, it feels good to remember where I came from.
Yes. And it is going to resonate with somebody.
Yeah.
It absolutely is. So that's going to do it for us for this episode of the Recovery Scene. Thank you so much. If you guys liked what you heard, make sure you subscribe and like and share Tony's story, because the more people that we can impact, you know, the better. And remember, addiction isn't pretty, but recovery is beautiful. And we will see you all again.